अरे 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 hello everyone, we have to discuss about that ग्लोबल पॉलिटिक्स पार्ट 5 देख लेते हैं। इतना ही सो जा भैया खाने आ जा, भैया खाने सो जा, अरे इतना सो जा, इतना भैया खाना आजा, जा सो जा, सो जाओ, इधर सो जाओ, तुम इधर सो जाओ, इतने आजा, इतने अरे भैया खाने आजा मोड़ी। Focus on what is the relationship between the theory and the reality, and do the theory and merely explain the world, or do they in either sense contract the world conventional approaches to global the politics and as reflected in the realism and liberalism and orthodox Marxism, and has been the based on the positivist and sometimes encoded the naturalism and or the rationalism. Positivism and is the ground rooted in the assumptions and that and there is the such a the things and as the reality a world out there and that our knowledge of it and can be the built and up and through the repeatables and experiments and observations and deduction, and that is why by the use of the scientific method and the word and therefore his is a solid on the concept and the character and knowledge and can be the objective and untainted and by the feelings and value or the views of any the kind and enthusiasm and for the constructing and such a science of the international politics and field in the 1960 and 1970 and with emergence and most of the strongly and in the USA of the behavioralism and from other positive and perspective and the theories and have other strictly and the explanations and the purpose they are derived for the explaining and the world and can be the shown and to be the either and true or the place and depending on how far they the correspondence to the reality. However, since the 1918 and the positivism and the approach to international politics has been subjected to criticism and from other ranges of the so-called and post the positivist and the approach and thus the includes and critical theories and constructivism and postulation and in the certain respected and the feminism and the post and the structuralism and what does the approaches have in the common and is that they the questions the beliefs and that there is and the objectives and reality out there separate from the beliefs and idea and assumptions and of the observers and as we observe the world and we are also in the process of the imposing अबे खाली जा रहे हैं which is seen and to have other constructive and the purposes and not the merely and the explanatories and want the greater attention. देखिए क्या चाहिए तो such and the approach and lead to other more and the criticals and the reflectives and view of the theory and which is seen and to have other constructive and purpose and not merely and the explanatories and one and greater the attention is therefore paid to the BS and the hidden and assumptions and that are the embodied and in the theory and implies and that imply that and the dispirited and scholarships and may always be and the unachievable and ideas and postmoderns and thinkers and take such ideas and furthest and in the suggestions and that the quest for objective trust and should be the abandoned donate and altogether and as all the knowledge is the partial and relative. Constructivism and the post-structuralist and the dominant and realist and the paradigms. So power politics has been other particulars and the object of the criticism and the feminist and have the argument that the theory of the power politics is the premised and on the masculinist and the assumptions and about arising from other tendency and to see the world and in the terms of the interactions and the among the series of the power cities and the autonomous and actor and the analyticals and feminism is concerned and not only and to the expose and such the biases and but also to the composition alternative and conceptions and theories and for example once the linking and powers and not to the conflict but to the collaborations and feminist theory and the implications and of the gender based analysis and are the examines and in the greater and details and in the chapter 17 green politics and all the ecologism and has had and the impact on the international theory and since issues and such as the limits and to the growth and the populations and times and bombs and come on the political agenda in the 1970 and however interested in it has the increased and the substantially and since the 1919 and as a result of growing the concern and about the climates and changes often and views and as the archetypicals and global issues the centrals and the themes of green politics in the notions and of and the intrinsics and the link between the humankind and natures and sometimes a linkage to the Gaia and hypothesis and the developed and by the James Lovelock. And green the politics nevertheless and encompasses the wide ranges of the theoretical position. जब मोड़ा जो छोटे हो एक में चली आ मैं मेरी कमी पूरी कर दो आप क्या ए देखी गिरा दाओ देख वहां भुंडा फोड़ दाओ देख जो है तो जान की वजह से बच में समझला J.N. Tinkners and born 1937 as a U.S. the academics and the feminist and international relation theory and the exponent of the standard and point and feminism and the thinkers and has the exposed and be in the J.N. Tinkners and the born 1937 and a U.S. the academies and the feminist and the international relation theorist and the exponent of the standard point and feminist the thinkers and has the explosion way in which the conventionals and study of the international relations are the marginalized genders and whilst and also the being and itself gendered. Her best known and book The Gender in the International Relation 1992 the highlights the biases and the limitations and of the masculinized and geopolitical versions of the national security and demonstrating and that it may the enhances the rather than the reduce the insecurities and of the individuals and the showings and how peace economic justice and the ecological sustainability and are the vitals and to the women's security and although and see the argued and that the gender relations and shape Save the search for the knowledge and the thinkers, and the ultimate goals is to be the transcend and gender by the overcoming and gender the inequality and her others the works and include the hands and more. Hence the more Jan Thayu and the principle of the political realism. Although see the argued and that the gender relation and save the search and for the knowledge and thinkers, the ultimate goal is to be transcend and genders by the overcoming and gender inequality and hurt the others works and include the hands and the Mongentheus and the principle of political realism is the feminist in reformulations and the 1988 and the feminist perspectives on the 9/11 to quite different implication and for the international affairs and the global politics and mainstreams or the reformist green thinking attempt and to the developed and a the balance and between the modernizations and the economic growth on the one hand and the need and to the tackles environmentals and the degradations. On the other, it is the key themes and is the notions of the sustainable development and which by the linking environmentals and to the economic goal and has the extracted considerables and the influences on the development theory and the particularly in the goal. In the global south and radicals green the theorist and the nevertheless and go further and some for the instant and the argues and that the balance and the between the humankinds and the natures and will only and be the restored and by the radicals social changes and for the eco-socialist and the sources of the environmental and crisis is the capitalist and economic system is the which commodified and the natures and draw it into the system of market exchange and the eco and the anarchist and the advanced and the environmental and the critics and of the hierarchies and the authorities and the argues and that the dominations and over others the pupils is linked to dominations and over the nature and eco the feminist advance and the environmentals and the critics and of the male powers and the suggesting that the dominations over woman leads and to the dominations and over the nature and deep the ecologist and for this the part and the argued that only paradigms and changes the adoptions and of other radically and new the philosophicals and the moral perspective and based on the radicals holism and rather than conventionals and the magnetics and atomistics and thinking and will brings and the end to the environmental degradations. This in effect and thread the nature as and the integrated and whole the within and which every the species and has and the equal right to the live and the blooms. The nature and the implications and of the green politics and are the discussion more the fully in chapter 16 post-colonialism and colonialism. The final criticals and the perspective on the global politics is the post-colonialism and the theorist and the post-colonialism and have the tied and to the expose the culture and the dimensions and of the colonials and the rules and the usually and by the stabilization the legitimacy of the non-western and the sometimes and the anti-western ideas culturals and the traditions and in one of the most and the influences work of the post-colonials and theories that the Edward said and developed the notions of the Orientalism and to the highlights the extent to which and the Western culture and the political hegemony over the rest of the world and but over the oriented in particular has been maintained and through the elaborated and the stereotypicals and the fiction and that the belittled and the diminished and known the Western peoples and culture example of the such stereotypes. James Lovelock and born 1999 UK, the atmospheric chemist and investors and the environmental thinkers and Lovelock and was the recruited and by the NASA as the part of its the team and the devices and the strategies and for the identified and life on the Mars and but he has the subsequently and works and as and the independence and the scientist and for over the 40 years and he the adapts the holistics and approach into the science and which the rejected and the disciplinaries and the distinctions and the emphasis and the instead and the interconnectedness and the love look and is the best known and for the Giaza and hypothesis and which the proposed and that the earth and is the best understood is other complex and self the regulating living the beings and this the implies and that the prospect for the humankind are the closely and the linkage and to the weather the species and help to the sustainer or to the threat and the planetary and the ecosystem and Lovelock and was also the first and the person to alert the bird to the worldwide and the presence and of the CFCSN in the atmosphere and his the sleep work and include the guys and the 1979 and the ages of the guys as in 1989 include image and such as the mysterious is in the incredibles and the Chinese and the lustful and Turks and the culturals and vices and generated by the colonialism and do not the only and affect and the subjugated and the formers and colonized and peoples the however and they also have other continuing impact on the western and state and which is the assume the mentals and of the internationals and the community in the claimings the authorities and to the short out less the favorite and part of the example part of the world and in this the views and humanitarian interventions and the can be seen as and the example of the Eurocentrics and the forcivals and the intervention of the intervention of the allegedly and the humanism and the ground and for that the matters and other the form of the interference in the developing and colonizations by the others means and the idea and the others and the post colonials and are the discussed in the greater depth in chapter 8 thinking globally. The acceleration of the globalization and from the 1918 and onwards and not only the contributed and to the recognizations and of the world politics and it also the brought and with its the series of the new theoreticals and the challenges and not the least and of thus are the problems. Thus was the problem of the conceptualizing and the emerging conditions of the global interconnectedness in which the politicals in which politics and is the increasingly and emerges imaged and in the wave of the interdependencies and that the operate and both the within and the across worldwide and regionals and national and the subnationals and level how is it the possibles and in the other words and to the think globally and what are the implications and of the global thinkings and three the challenges and have the emergent and in the particulars the first and the concern the difficulties and that the global interconnectedness and poses to the empiricals and the understandings and how can be make and sense of the normatives and the implications of global interconnectedness and have the wider social connections and between the people extended the morals universe in which we the live and the third concern the value of the theories or the paradigm and does the interconnectedness and means that the instead of the choosing between the paradigms we should think beyond the paradigms challenge of the interconnectedness and to what the extent can the established and the theories on both the mainstreams and the criticals and engaged in the global thinking in many the ways and this is the indicated and by the degrees to the which they are able to address the issues and of the globalization. The picture and here is the mixed. As far as the realism is the concerned, it is the core and focus on the unit level and analysis, taking the state and to be the primarily actor on the world stage and puts it the starkly and eight odds and with most of the claims and made about the globalization and especially and the ideas of and the interlocking global economy. Thus the insurers and as the realist and have the address the issues of the globalization, it is to the Danny and that it is the anything and a new or the different. Globalization is more of the same as the game play by the state and for the states and thus much wanted interdependence and world is thus the largely and the myth and from other realist and the perspective and liberals and the new liberals and on the other hand have both been able if not the eagers and to the incorporated and the phenomena of globalization into their the thinkings. For liberals and the advent of the globalization and fitted and in well too long established an idea about the economic interdependence and the virtues of the free trade and must the globalist and the theory sinks and indeed is based on the liberals and the assumptions and especially and about the tendency of the market and to achieve the long term equilibriums, bringing with it both the generals and prosperities and the widenings and freedoms and Adam Smith and the image of the invisibles and hand of market competition and can the therefore and be the seen to the provide the basis for other market based and the similarly positive models of the global inter and the connectedness and Marxist and the neo Marxism theorist similarly and the found no the difficulties in the addressing the issues of the globalization. Marx and after all and may have been the first and economic thinkers to have draw the attention and to the transnational and non the merely and internationals and charters of capitalism and for the new Marxism and economic globalization was the really and only the manifestation of the emergence of the capitalist and world system or the global capitalism. And however this image of the globalization was clearly negatives and characteristics and by the growing divisions and between core areas and the peripherous areas and thus is the debates and emerges in the 1919 and over the benefits and the burdens of growing globals and connectedness and thus the debates more and essentially familiars and face the pro-globalization arguments drew largely from the pool of the liberals ideas and while the anti-globalization arguments were based the significantly and through by no the means exclusively and on new the Marxism or quasi and Marxism thinkings. And however some the argues and that the challenges of the global interconnectedness and DeFi and all the established and the theories and in the effect required the development of and the entirely and new the ways of the thinking. And this is the because the rise of the complex form of the connectedness make it the difficult and the perhaps impossible to think any the longer in the conventional terms of the causes and effect in an interdependence and world the relationship between the two or the more factors and process or variables are the characteristics by the reciprocals and accusations or mutual conditionings. Thus, if A, B, and C are the interdependent, and then any the change in B will be the result in other change in A and C. Any the change in A will be result in other change in B and the C and any change in C and will be the result in other change in A. Change in A and changes and not just B and the C, but also A itself and means that it is the becomes difficult to think in the terms of A-ness and B-ness or indeed and in the terms of the thingsness and in any the sense and as such the complex interconnectedness and arguably and challenges the very basis of reasonings in the Western tradition in which the dates and back to Aristotle's and assertions and that the everything and must the either way or not be the while, and this the dualistics or the either or approach to the thinking implies that the world can be the understood in terms of the linears and causal relationship complex the interconnectedness and perhaps call for and the alternative holistics and non dualistics and therefore non-the-linear approach to understanding Eastern thinkings in the generals and the Buddhism in particulars, and by the virtues of its the strength on the oneness grounded in the brief and that all the concept and object are empty of the our being, and the Clark and the 1997 are often seen and the archetypical example of either non and the dualistic thinking. Other attempt to think and beyond the either or the distinctions and include the fuzzy thinkings and Costco 1994 and deep the ecology and the Capra 1996 and the systems thinking Capra 2003, but Bayer does known the linearies and or the non and the dualist thinkings and lead us one of its the key implications and is that and as the patterns of the causal relationships become the increasingly difficult to the identified events take on other random and the seemingly in arbitrary and the characters, and this is the highlighted by the choose theory in which the descripts and systems whose the behavior is difficult to predict because they consist of so many the variables or the unknown factors and choose the tendencies and may for instance cosmopolitanism and global interconnectedness and does not the merely challenges us in the terms of the how and we understand the world and but also the perhaps in the terms of the our moral relationship and the advance of the globalization have the undoubtedly and had and the ethicals and dimension in that, and it has the renewals and the interested in the forms of the cosmopolitanism and often the expressed through the growing interested in ideas and such as the global justice or the world ethics and global 1998 and the Kane and the 2005 and as the world has the shrunken in the sense of the pupils and having other greater awareness of the others people and living in the other countries and often it other greater distance from the themselves, and it has becomes the more and difficult to the confine there the moral and the obligations in simply to other single political society, and the more and they now the more they care and the for and the cosmopolitarians and the theorists, and this the implies and that the world and has come to constitute other singles and the moral and communities and pupils thus have and the obligations and the potentially and towards all the others and pupils in the world, and regardless of the nationalism religions and ethnicality, and so the fourth and such the thinking is the usually and based on the doctrine of the human rights pose 2008 and broke this the rights and the based and the cosmopolitarianism into the three elements, and it is the belief in the individualism and in that the human beings or the persons and are the ultimate unit of the morals and concern seconds it expected universities in the sense and that the individuals are of the equal moral and worth. The third and it is third is the acknowledge in the generalities and in that and it is the implies and that the person are the objects of the concern for the everybody, not just and there the compatriot and other the forms of the moral and the cosmopolitarianism and have the also been and the advanced and however or the nil in 1996, and thus the used in the Kantians and the notion and that we they should and act on the principles and that we would be the billings and to apply and to all the pupils and in all the circumstances and to argues and that the people have the commitment and not to the injures and the others and that will that this the commitment and has other universal scopes and singer the 2002 and on the other hand and argues and that the ethics and of the globalization and demand that we should act and so as to reduce the overall and levels of the global and suffering and thinking in the terms of the one world and rather than the collection of the decrees and the countries or papers more at more and cosmopolitanism and also has and the its and criticism and how viewers and one hand and the radicals and criticism of the cosmopolitarians and rejected the ideas and such as the globals and the justice or the world ethics and on the grounds and that it is the impossible to the established and the universals and values and that are the bindings and on all the peoples and all the societies and this the culturals and relativist and is often and used to the argues and that the women's rights and in the particulars and are the essential are the best ideas and therefore वो सर भी तो ऐसा ही रहता है हाँ for have no place in the known the western and the cultures and from other borders and perspective and the cosmopolitarians and the is the often and the contrasted with the communitarianism and from the communitarianism and the perspective and moral value only the make and sense and when they are the guide grounded and in other particulars and society and other particulars and historical spirit and this implies do moral obligation extended to the whole of the humanities. At the heart of the ideas of the global justice is the notions of the universal right and the obligations and stretching across the globes and stabilizing and the justice and beyond the borders and but what is the basis and for the such and the thinking and how the perceives and it is it yes human as the moral and the creatures and the core features of the cosmopolitarian ethics is the ideas and that the individuals and rather than any the particulars and the politicals political community is the principles and sources and of the moral value and most the commonly and this is the assertives this is the asserted and through the doctrine of the human rights and the notion and that the peoples are the entitled and to it the list the minimal condition for leading other birth and whilst existence and their rights and are the fundamental and the virtues of their the humanity and the cannot be the denied on the ground of the nationality and the religious and cultures and density or the whatever they are the doctrine of the human right therefore the implies and that there is but other single ethical community and that is the humankind and purpose the everywhere are part of the same moral universe